Okay, hello everyone. Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to Fraser Mansion tonight for this very special presentation. I would first like to acknowledge, of course, the Ambassador of Zimbabwe, Dr. MACHIVENYIKA MAPURANGA. Thank you so much for being with us and for presenting. As well, Her Excellency Amelia Mata Sumbana, Ambassador of the Republic of Mozambique. Thank you so much for being here. And then I also want to acknowledge representatives and from the embassies of Sri Lanka, Romania, Angola, Cape Verde, and Ethiopia as well. Thank you so much for joining us. And all of our non-diplomats, thank you for being here as well. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Barry Berger. I'm the Public Affairs Director here, and this is the Church of Scientology National Affairs Office. So this is the headquarters for our public policy work and the humanitarian programs that we sponsor internationally. Okay? And so our founder actually traveled to Zimbabwe in 1966, back when it was Rhodesia. He established a center there, and we now have two churches, one in Bulawayo and one in Harare, which we're very proud to have. And L. Ron Hubbard, our founder, was very, very fond of Africa. And he said from southern Africa would spring the next great civilization on earth. So he clearly thought very highly of it. And to introduce His Excellency the Ambassador, we're going to welcome Dr. Johannes Zalecki. He's a dear friend and a man of many hats, which I'm about to relay. So firstly, he is an adjunct professor of archaeology and anthropology at George Washington University. He's also a researcher for the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. And he is the president of the Mid-Atlantic chapter of the Africa Travel Association. He's also just a great guy. Okay, so please welcome Dr. Zalecki. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Mr. Ambassador, it's always great to see you. Today we have a special program. This is the beginning of the embassy series in the Church of Scientology. It's going to continue with all African embassies and other embassies. Things what we're going to do is to learn more about Africa, African diplomacy, culture, human rights, and other issues. And we are very proud to have His Excellency Dr. Mapuranga, the extraordinary ambassador to the United States. He has been here for many years, since 2005. He has been a United Nations permanent mission ambassador to the United Nations permanent mission. He was an ambassador in Ethiopia. He was an ambassador to the African Union, and also he has been in different capacities in the politics of Africa in different parts of the country, the continent. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm struggling. I always speak clear. Probably I didn't drink wine. Anyway, to make the record straight, Mr. Ambassador has been a history student of all his life. All his schooling was in England, so he knows the conservative school of Oxford or the radical school of London. So he's a product of both schools. Today he will give us a great presentation regarding his great country, which we love all. I've been in that country many times. The history of Zimbabwe is phenomenal. From the archaeology to nature to people, it's a unique country. If there is one country we can visit, that's one of them. Zimbabwe is the greatest Zimbabwe. Yeah. The great Zimbabwe is the great Zimbabwe. It's a landmark for all Africa and the rest of the world. Zimbabwe has many political parties. They have been working hard. I remember from the day of the independence all the way now what's going on, and it is the ambassador agenda to tell us briefly about it. And you guys, please keep him engaged in asking a lot of questions. This is the only opportunity you have. It's once a while you get an ambassador to come and talk to you. Let's welcome His Excellency the Ambassador. Thank you.
Good evening to you all. I wish to start by thanking the organizers of this event, and especially Madam for inviting me to talk about my country and to answer questions the audience may wish to pose, as indicated by Dr. Ioannis here. Now, books have been written on the pre-colonial, the colonial, and the post-colonial story of Zimbabwe. In the limited time that is available to us this evening, I decided to highlight the major events and processes that have taken place in my country since the British invasion and colonization in 1890. And so I will try to summarize it. I mean summarize because not the summary that the summarization that was talked about by one Idi Amin. Idi Amin was an army sergeant in the Ugandan army, and at the instigation of the British, he staged a coup d'etat against the president, Milton Obote, who was talking about the move to the left, the move to the left. And the British thought that this was a threat to British interests, so he took over. Now, at one event, his Minister of Foreign Affairs spoke for 10 minutes, and then the president said, I will now summarize. And he spoke for 30 minutes. So, but mine is a real summary. So Zimbabwe was conquered and colonized in 1890 by the British South Africa Company, whose leader, Cecil John Rhodes, was the eponymous personality for the new British colony, Rhodesia. Now, he served as Prime Minister of the Cape Province in South Africa, and averred that his greatest ambition was to paint Africa red from Cape to Cairo, red being the color of the British Empire on the map, on the world map. The British South Africa Company ruled southern Rhodesia, now southern Rhodesia, because in the meantime the company had conquered, it had gone beyond the Zambezi River and conquered territory there, which was named Northern Rhodesia, and another territory, which is now Malawi. Northern Rhodesia is now Zambia, and Malawi used to be Nyasaland. And so this company, territory conquered by a company with a royal charter. They say you can go and grab land on behalf of Her Majesty, Queen Victoria. So they ruled until 1922, when at a referendum, the white settlers voted for responsible government. They didn't want to be ruled by the company anymore. They wanted this, because the population of the white settlers had increased, and they said we can take care of our affairs. So they demanded a form of self-government, short of real outright independence. And at that referendum, they were given a choice either to have responsible government or self-government, or to join South Africa as the fifth province of South Africa. And they said, no, South Africa is dominated by what they call the Boers or Afrikaners. And they were those in Rhodesia were of English stock. So they said, no, we'd rather have self-government and not join South Africa and be ruled by these rustic Boers. The colonial experience of Zimbabwe and South Africa now differs from that of the rest of British territories south of the Sahara. It differs because it was predicated on the premise that these two countries, Rhodesia and South Africa, were for permanent white settlement. They're not for just commercial territory for exploitation, but to make a permanent home, permanent white settlement, largely because of considerations of the congenial, temperate climates, as well as what they thought was the vast reserves of mineral wealth in those two countries. They were destined to be dominions within the British Empire or the British Commonwealth that replaced it, along with Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. Now, each of these 5 territories, i.e., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Rhodesia, and South Africa, if you peruse the Colonial Office documents at Kew Gardens in London, where I did my research, you'll find that they are referred to as white man's country. White man's country. And when Cecil John Rhodes was in this newly conquered country, which he called God's own country, is his words, God's own country, and he declared in his testament that he did not wish to be buried in the United Kingdom or in South Africa, where he had been Prime Minister, but in Rhodesia, at a place he called the World's View. I've been there. Maybe some of you have been there. It's a magnificent place at the Matopo Hills near Bulawayo. And to this day, Rhodes' grave is a national monument which attracts plenty of tourists. So bear that in mind. Now, the policy of white men's country rested on 2 pillars. One, the implementation of a demographic revolution whereby the incoming white settlers would eventually outnumber the natives, as happened successfully in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, countries that later became dominions within the British Commonwealth. Now, Zimbabwe and South Africa were the 2 countries in Africa that were earmarked for the same destiny. The second pillar consisted of herding the native population into native reserves. They're called native reserves. And I was born in a native reserve myself. At the height of land alienation, natives were left with 20% of the landmass, while the rest was appropriated for permanent white settlement. And so the question of land has been at the core, at the heart of the Rhodesian political or Zimbabwean political experience since the Land Apportionment Act was passed in 1930. And the process of land expropriation continued through subsequent legislation well into the 1960s. And this is why the question of land in Zimbabwe is such a contentious issue, because there are people who are alive today who knew that they used to live there, but they were subsequently removed to make way for the incoming white farmers. Now, the Rhodesian Front Party came into power in 1964 on a platform of white supremacy. The Prime Minister, Ian Smith, vowed that there would never be democracy on the basis of one man, one vote, or universal adult suffrage in his lifetime. No, he changed later and said, not in 1,000 years. These are his words, not in 1,000 years. This was said because he said universal adult suffrage, or one man, one vote, is like counting the heads of sheep or goats. He said, no, we want responsible government in Rhodesia. So this was said at a time when the rest of Africa, to the north of Zimbabwe, was winning its independence under black majority rule, beginning with Ghana's independence in 1957. The African population in Zimbabwe, without the franchise, was left with no option but to embark on an armed struggle in order to win democracy in their country. So the Liberation War was commenced in 1966 and culminated in the 1979 Lancaster House Conference in London, which was chaired by the British Foreign Secretary Lord Solmes. Lord Carrington. Now, it is pertinent to mention here that the Western, and I want to, because I was told that this was going to be a very friendly and frank discussion, so I want to say this. I'm not going to mince any words, and then we will discuss. It is pertinent to mention here that the Western powers who are preaching democracy and freedom today were not on the side of the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid struggles in Southern Africa. In fact, some of you may even know that Nelson Mandela and his colleagues in the ANC, it was only when Condoleezza Rice said, like an afterthought, she said, these guys are still on our list of terrorists, and they removed them from the terrorism list. Was it 7 years ago or something like this, just before Obama came in. So in the U.S., they defied UN sanctions. UN sanctions that had been imposed on the rebel Ian Smith regime in Zimbabwe, the famous or the notorious Byrd Amendment was a piece of legislation passed by the U.S. Congress, which was crafted to defy United Nations Security Council sanctions on Rhodesia in order to enable the importation of chrome and other what they called strategic minerals. Now, the Lancaster House Constitution, under which Zimbabwe was governed until about 10 days ago, when we got a new constitution on the 22nd of May. Yes, this year. It was the Lancaster House Constitution was, in most respects, a Westminster type of constitution, providing for a ceremonial head of state, a president, and an executive prime minister, an independent judiciary, a justiciable bill of rights, multi-party system, free press and freedom of association. That's the constitution that was given to us by the British at the end of the Liberation War. It also, we call it the Liberation War, but here you call yours the War of Independence, but it boils down to the same thing, really. It also provided for two entrenched clauses which could not be amended until after 10 years. One, 20 seats in Parliament were reserved for whites. So in a Parliament of 100, 20 were reserved, were untouchable, cannot be contested. These are white seats for 10 years. And people were asking, but why should that be? They said, this is a confidence-building measure, because if the white man goes, the economy will collapse. And I'm sure that was correct, because Africans were not really involved in the economy except as purveyors of cheap labor. So that was correct. So the 20 seats were reserved for them and could not be contested by anybody else. No legislation could be effected forcibly to forcibly redistribute land on an equitable basis. And again, for 10 years, land acquisition was on the basis of willing seller and willing buyer. As this is the case in Namibia today and in South Africa today, willing seller, willing buyer. The 1980 election was the first democratic election, 1980. It was organized and supervised on behalf of the British government by the last British governor, Lord Solmes. And it was observed by international observers, including the United Nations and the Commonwealth. It was won by Robert Mugabe's party, and he proceeded to be the first democratically elected prime minister in the history of the country. Since then, general elections have been held without fail every 5 years, and have been certified as free and fair by the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, the predecessor of the African Union, and also by the Southern African Development Community, or SADC, among other international observers. The British government of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher had promised to fund the land reform program by buying land from the white farmers and distributing it to landless black peasants and those in the native reserves. A little land was indeed bought during what was known as the inception phase. But when the Labour Party of Tony Blair defeated the Conservative Party of Margaret Thatcher in a general election in 1997, British funding was terminated by a letter from the then British Minister for Overseas Development, Mrs. Claire Short. The Land Acquisition Act, which had been passed in 1979, became the basis for the land reform program, and the Constitution was subsequently amended to make the new law constitutional. Now, the slow pace of land reform, it took 20 years, led to what I might call incipient revolt, when landless peasants, supported by Liberation War veterans, started to occupy white farms, daring the Zimbabwean police to arrest them or the army to shoot them. Now, none of them could do that because these two forces, the police force and the army were also substantially made up of Liberation War veterans. To stem the tide of revolt, the government was forced to launch a fast-track land reform program in the year 2000 in order to hasten the redistribution of land. This led the British government to instigate the formation, and through the Westminster Foundation, to fund the creation of an opposition party called the Movement for Democratic Change, with Morgan Tsvangirai as its president and leader. The British and their allies in the European Union imposed sanctions, and so did the US Congress. The sanctions basket consisted of two packages. There was a list of leaders barred from entering the United States and whose properties would be confiscated if they were identified. And then the Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act, ZIDERA, which imposed financial sanctions on Zimbabwe. Now, falling productivity in all sectors of the economy resulted in an economic crisis, generating disaffection among the voters. So, and the British and their allies categorically stated that their aim, their policy in Zimbabwe is what they called regime change. They're the words they use, regime change. Now, and so in the 2000 general election, the ruling party, ZANU-PF, won 63 seats, while the newly created MDC, which was barely a couple of years old, won 57 seats, and made a difference of just 6 seats in a parliament of 120 contested seats. And at that time, it became the largest parliamentary opposition in the whole of Africa. Now, after the 2000 general election, the situation in Zimbabwe was still characterized by a multi-party democratic system in which the largest parliamentary opposition party in Africa, the MDC, was unfortunately for them in a process of apparent disintegration when two factions emerged over the question of whether or not there should be a Senate in Zimbabwe after the American example, and whether or not the party should participate in senatorial elections to be held in December 2005. Now, one faction held its National Congress in February 2006 and elected a new leadership headed by Professor Arthur Mutambara. The other faction is led by the older leader, Morgan Tsvangirai, and it held its own Congress to choose a new leadership in April 2006. So this split, the split within the MDC, was greeted with utter disappointment in London and Washington, because both the United Kingdom and the United States governments and their allies in the European Union were hoping for what they called regime change that would usher in a government that would reverse the land reform program, which they saw as undemocratic and a violation of human rights, a view that was contested by the ruling party, which saw such an argument as a defense of white privilege and power. The State Department 2006 Human Rights Report proclaimed that the United States government is working with the opposition and civil society organizations to have the ZANU-PF government replaced by an MDC government. So the British and US governments failed on several occasions in their attempt to have Zimbabwe condemned by the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in Geneva. Their draft resolutions submitted on an annual basis every year always been defeated by the rest of the members in the Human Rights Commission. Zimbabwe, on the contrary, was elected and served as a member of the Human Rights Commission. The government saw this as a great act of solidarity. This Human Rights Commission is now known as you know, the Human Rights Council. Now, in the face of fierce opposition by the UK, the US, and their allies, Zimbabwe was even elected chairman of the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development in 2007, to the outrage of London and Washington. Now, let me try to cut out a few things in the interest of time. In the meantime, President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa, he got all the parties involved represented in the Zimbabwe Parliament to try and negotiate the formation of a coalition government or a government of national unity. And this began to bear fruit, and in September 2007, all the parties in the talks agreed on constitutional amendment number 18. They decided to amend the constitution in order to accommodate a power-sharing arrangement. This agreement consisted of one, a presidential, parliamentary, and local government elections to be held simultaneously the following year, in 2008. They agreed on that. The presidential term of office was reduced from 6 to 5 years, and no one could serve as president and one could serve as president for only a maximum of 2 terms. Because, you know, I already said that it was a Lancaster House constitution, and the British Constitution does not have limited terms. You know that Margaret Thatcher, when she resigned, she was well into her 3rd term. And even for the United States of America, the great FDR, when he died, I think he was in his 4th term. Right, so the 2-term limit is a very recent development, and Zimbabwe has also embraced it. The new constitution, which came into being about 14 days ago, has 2-term limits. Yeah. So then the Senate was expanded from 66 to 84 seats, while the House was expanded from 150 to 210. All of them elected. None of the seats were occupied by appointees, as was in the previous constitution. A joint sitting of the House and the Senate would elect an acting president if the incumbent dies or is incapacitated, or he resigns and until the next presidential election, which must be held within 90 days. They agreed to establish a human rights commission to alter the title of Commissioner of Police and that of Ombudsman to those of Commissioner General of Police and Public Protector, respectively, and to provide for the appointment of a Deputy Chief Justice. So the talks between the three parties continued under the facilitation of President Thabo Mbeki and resulted in an agreement on the rest of the modalities of elections, which were held on the 29th of March 2008. And I think most of you are aware of the results of those elections. In the House elections, the ruling ZANU-PF party, the ruling party of Robert Mugabe, lost its majority for the first time since independence, winning 97 seats to 99 by the MDC of Morgan Tsvangirai. MDC Mutambara won 10 seats, and there was one independent elected. In the Senate elections, ZANU-PF won 30 seats, the MDC Tsvangirai 24, and MDC Mutambara 6. So ZANU-PF 30 seats, the opposition 30 seats in the Senate. In the presidential election, President Robert Mugabe won 43.7% of the votes cast. Morgan Tsvangirai of the MDC won 47.9%. And the independent candidate called Simba Makoni won 8%. So the Constitution of Zimbabwe and the Electoral Act stipulated that a presidential candidate must acquire the requisite threshold vote of 50% plus 1 to be declared outright winner. In the presidential election held on the 29th of March 2008, none of the candidates attained the threshold required. The Constitution of Zimbabwe and the Electoral Act further stipulated that in the absence of an outright winner in the first round of voting, there would be an electoral runoff. Both R.G. Mugabe and Morgan Tsvangirai agreed to go for the runoff. However, 5 days before the day of the runoff, Morgan Tsvangirai declared that he was withdrawing from the election, citing violence against his supporters by those of the ruling party. This withdrawal, however, was declared null and void by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, the ZEC, because the Electoral Act stipulated that a withdrawal shall not be effected less than 21 days to the day of the election. And he tried to withdraw 5 days before the election. Hence, his name was on the ballot sheet, and people voted for him and for his party. His party fully participated in the election for 3 parliamentary seats that were there for a by-election, and they won one of the 3. Now, on July 1, 2008, the African Union Summit meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt issued a resolution in which they endorsed SADC mediation, President Thabo Mbeki's mediation in Zimbabwe. And they encouraged all the parties to resume the process. And while this was going on, because they were trying to implement what they called the principle of African solutions to African problems. But the G8, which was meeting in Hokkaido in Japan, under the instigation of the Prime Minister of Britain, Gordon Brown, proceeded to completely ignore the African Union position and agreed on a package of further sanctions on the government of Zimbabwe. A draft resolution authored by the United Kingdom and the US government was circulated at the UN Security Council in New York. Among other things, it called for the declaration of Morgan Tsvangirai as the president of Zimbabwe, setting, some say this was setting a dangerous precedent whereby the United Nations Security Council would henceforth be the supreme organ for declaring who the winners and who the losers are in any given election in the world, ignoring the electoral laws and organs in the member states of the United Nations. Another draft resolution, which was vetoed by the Russian Federation and China, sought to impose a mandatory arms embargo and a travel ban on members of the Zimbabwe government, as well as freezing their assets. The British and the Americans found themselves the only ones voting for this, and the only African country to vote for this resolution. I will not mention its name, but when we talk, I can, when we chat, I can reveal the identity of that country. They had its president was in Washington D.C. To receive $410.9 million from the MCC. This is the Millennium Challenge Corporation, or the MCA, Millennium Challenge account. Now, we don't know whether this was a coincidence or not. Now, although the United Nations had turned down the sanctions package and applauded the African Union's resolution on Zimbabwe, the European Union and the Bush administration proceeded unilaterally to impose further sanctions on Zimbabwe, even as negotiations had commenced in South Africa. The sanctions were imposed on the argument that there was electoral violence in Zimbabwe, even though the MDC was claiming that about 80 of its supporters had perished in the violence. Observers say this was a small figure compared to the 2,000 who perished in Nigeria's election violence the same year, which did not invoke sanctions, and 3,000 in Ethiopia in the year 2008. There was indeed violence between the two sides, and there's mutual retribution of who started the violence and so forth and so on. The violence eventually petered out, and President Thabo Mbeki's mediation efforts have resulted in the signing on the 21st of July 2008 of a memorandum of understanding by the principals of these three parties. The MOU was an agreement by the three parties setting out an agenda for more substantive talks under SADC mediation with the support of the African Union. And so on the 11th of September 2008, President Thabo Mbeki formally announced that the three Zimbabwean political parties had reached a power-sharing agreement, which was subsequently signed on the 15th of September, in the presence of Mr. Zhang Ping, the chairman of the African Union Commission. The Global Political Agreement, or GPA, was a concrete testimony to the African Union's principle of seeking African solutions to African problems. So under the GPA, which is still in power right now as we speak, and it was subsequently endorsed by the Zimbabwe's parliament as Constitutional Amendment number 19. President Robert Mugabe would remain president of the country and continue to chair cabinet meetings, while Mr. Morgan Tsvangirai would become prime minister and chairman of the new body called the Council of Ministers. And Professor Arthur Mutambara would become one of the two deputy prime ministers. They shared cabinet ministries. 15 ministries went to ZANU-PF, 13 ministries to MDC Tsvangirai, and 3 ministries to MDC Mutambara, according to a government gazette dated the 10th of October 2008. And so this is where we are now. The GPA, this government formed under the GPA, had enormous tasks to accomplish within a limited time of 18 months. They had to give the country a new constitution. A new constitution was drafted following a countrywide exercise by the Parliamentary Committee on the Constitution, normally referred to as COPAC, to solicit the views of the populace on the content of the first homegrown constitution for the country. The resultant draft constitution was overwhelmingly approved in a national referendum. I happen to know that there was no referendum to approve the United States Constitution. We had a referendum in Zimbabwe, and this referendum was held on the 16th of March, and the Constitution was subsequently endorsed by the House on the 9th of May, and by the Senate on the 14th of May. The Constitution got its presidential assent on the 22nd of May. So we now have a new Constitution. Now, on the 31st of May, the Constitutional Court issued an injunction compelling President Mugabe to set a date for the next elections, which must be held before the 29th of July this year. So we are now awaiting the announcement of the election date, but meanwhile parties have already been holding their primaries to choose their candidates to contest the next election. Now all parties have been exhorting their members to ensure that there will be no violence in this election. I want to conclude by saying that the second term Obama administration has indicated that it is abandoning the U.S. policy, the policy of successive U.S. administrations on Zimbabwe, the policy which it inherited from the Bush and previous administrations, and continued to pursue during the first term, the first Obama administration, and during the tenure of Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, the policy of regime change. they've declared that they've abandoned this policy now. Secretary of State John Kerry dispatched a special envoy in the person of Andrew Young, former U.S. ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations, who was received by President Mugabe on the 16th of April with the message that the United States has indeed abandoned the policy of regime change and is willing to accept and to work with whoever wins the next election in Zimbabwe. Now, most of the sanctions that had been imposed on Zimbabwean leaders and corporations were lifted, and the rest would be removed depending on the conduct of the next election. There appears to be, as you can see, an improvement in U.S.-Zimbabwe bilateral relations, which I personally hope will gather momentum toward full normalization after the next election, because Zimbabwe is an attractive place for investment, and I think it was said in some U.S. circles that the United States is losing out to the Indians and the Chinese and others. This country that is has vast mineral resources, gold, diamonds, copper and zinc, platinum, uranium. You can think of any mineral, you'll find it in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe, of course, is also the land of the Victoria Falls and some of the best game parks in Africa, and ancient ruins all over Zimbabwe. And I can say that during the last few months, enormous volume of visa applications. Americans want to visit Zimbabwe, and that they do not want to be held back by the, by the bilateral quarrel between the two governments. Fortunately, the quarrel appears to be petering out. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Because we have such an intimate group here, we were thinking we might abandon the index cards, if that's all right with you, and take questions simply. Okay? Johannes is going to field that.
Sure. You did a great presentation. Now the floor is open for questions. Let's give a brief. All right?
Yes, I also thought it was an excellent recitation of history. Thank you. I also thought it was an excellent recitation of history. The question is, and how you laid out what happened with Blair in terms of the funds that came out of Britain to pay the settlers. And the way it was explained on the Hill was that Mugabe spent the money. They didn't explain it as the money was cut off by the British when Blair came in. Mm-hmm. So I'd like for you to speak to that, because that shaped the policies that came forward thereafter.
Yes. Let me, yeah. Yes, the Lancaster House Agreement came about under the chairmanship of Lord Carrington during the time that Margaret Thatcher of the Conservative Party, they are also known as the Tories in the UK, were in power. And they promised that they would marshal resources, financial resources, buy land from the white farmers so that land could be redistributed to landless natives. And indeed, Margaret Thatcher lived up to her word. Some money was sent for what was known as the inception phase of the land reform program. That is to do all the necessary studies and to determine how the exercise should go, should proceed and so forth. But lo and behold, elections were held in the United Kingdom, and that was in 1997. And the new government of Tony Blair, Prime Minister Tony Blair, and I mentioned this in my presentation, the Minister of Overseas Development, Claire Short, she sent a letter to the government of Zimbabwe to say they're not beholden to the promises made by the conservatives whom we have defeated in an election. And so we are not under any obligation to finance the land reform program. So that's, and by the way, there's an American twist to this as well. The question of land was so crucial in the talks at Lancaster House that the talks almost broke down, and the leaders of the two major liberation movements said, we're packing our bags, we're going back to the bush to wage the war. And Margaret Thatcher and President Jimmy Carter said, no. He sent Andrew Young, the Andrew Young who was sent to Harare in April by John Kerry as special envoy of John Kerry. He was there in London and persuaded these leaders not to go back to start the war again. Said the United States President Jimmy Carter has also joined in to say we will also marshal resources and make resources available to finance the land reform program. But after that, no, that never happened, no.
And that was the basis for the sanctions that came after that under Bush.
Yeah, because the liberation parties, leaders, said in the absence of financial resources to buy this land for redistribution, we're going to take it because the land was not, we cannot buy our land. It was not bought from us, it was forcibly taken from us. And we have waged a liberation war. We are not going to tax our people to buy our land back. So, and that's why they passed legislation for the fast track of forcibly seizing land and redistributing it. By the way, people think that there are no more white farmers in Zimbabwe. I would like you to do your homework here, okay? The largest number of white farmers in Africa is in South Africa. The second largest number of white farmers was in Zimbabwe. But it's the number 2 country now with the largest number of white farmers is Kenya. Zimbabwe is number 3 now. I think they have something like 400 to 500 white farmers still. So, but the land reform program is over, but we still have white farmers, but they have, their number has been greatly reduced.
Mr. Ambassador,
Would you please present yourself?
yeah, Dr. Randy Short.
All right, thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you for coming, and I have maybe very short questions. You mentioned that they're changing the policy for regime change, and I was just curious. My question one, our National Security Advisor just submitted his letter of resignation, so it looks as if Susan Rice, known to have strong feelings towards President Mugabe, is likely to be the next National Security Advisor. Number two, there's a film called Mugabe, Hero or Villain, made by a friend of mine from Ghana, and I'm hoping, because so many people would stand to benefit to hear a Zimbabwean view of what the situation has been, if that's something that you might share with the Washington community. And third, to commend the people of Zimbabwe. I believe that it gets a bad rap. South Africa has had thousands of white farmers killed or wounded or robbed. Zimbabwe, even in its worst case scenario, has never had the kind of covert war against whites that exist in South Africa. I'm not against people getting their land in South Africa, but Zimbabwe, which gets a bum rap, very few people have been harmed compared to what continues to happen in South Africa.
Yes, I've heard about, I was watching the president introducing Susan Rice as the, she failed to get the post of Secretary of State because she had to go through congressional hearing. But I'm told that this particular post doesn't need a congressional hearing, so she's going to get the job. But I don't know. I thought myself that John Kerry has already started. He has launched an initiative, his own personal envoy, and proclaimed a new policy. And I'm not persuaded that Susan Rice can change that. I don't know how these things work within the administration, but I'm hopeful that the U.S. government will continue on the trajectory that of the policy trajectory that has been launched by Secretary of State John Kerry. Now, concerning South African white farmers. Oh, the film, the film, I haven't seen it myself. They are not showing, it has not been released on DVD or on the internet. They're showing it in cinemas. They're hopping from place to place. But I'm told that that film, Mugabe, Villain or Hero or Villain, was meant to generate a debate. The makers of that film were saying, and I watched them in an interview, that in the West, i.e. in the United States and Britain and Western Europe, they only hear one side of the story, and they want to present both sides of the story so they could make their own judgment. That's what I heard. Yes, at the height of the land reform program in Zimbabwe, tempers were very high. At the end of the land reform program, 3 white farmers were dead. Because you know, they would, and I'm told that those who died would not you know, stomach any nonsense. You know, they wanted to defend their land, what they regarded as their land. It was their land, so they resisted by force, and at the end of it, three of them died. Yeah, but and this is where you want to make another homework. I ask you to make another homework. I'm told I read somewhere a statement by the government of South Africa that over 1,000 white farmers have died since South Africa became a democracy in 1994. You want to check that out. But this was a statement by the government of South Africa that over 1,000 white farmers have been killed in South Africa since 1994.
Okay, Johannes? Okay, I was going to give it to Mike.
Sure. Would you present yourself?
Mr. Ambassador, at the time that Lord Carrington...
Would you present yourself?
Pardon? Oh, I'm Mike Davidson. At the time that Lord Carrington was trying to negotiate a settlement, there were three different groups, one led by Joshua Nkomo, one led by the bishop, and then, of course, the ZANU party led by Robert Mugabe. Each one represent different regional areas that would presented some very difficult provisions. Now, did not that impact the land reform ultimately, because each of those were, if it had been more of an integrated approach, do you think, in retrospect, it would have been probably a little smoother operation, and that the complete breakdown that took place later may not have occurred if there had been more integration of these three different factions, if you will, at the time of independence?
Yeah. Well, by the time all these parties went to the Lancaster House conference, Bishop Abel Muzorewa was no longer what you might call an independent force. He was in the government of Ian Smith, because Ian Smith had formed what he called, he'd engineered what he called an internal settlement intended to isolate the armed parties, that is ZAPU of Joshua Nkomo and ZANU of Robert Mugabe. So really, by the time the conference was held, Muzorewa and Ian Smith were in one camp. They represented the internal settlement government, and in opposition to the two armed liberation movements. And when it came to the question of land, both Joshua Nkomo and Robert Mugabe's parties, they were of one mind. And I mentioned they threatened to leave. They were actually packing their bags to go, because the land, we said, no, where's the land? That's what we've been fighting for. And so, and then Jimmy Carter intervened, and the British also, Margaret Thatcher said, no, we'll fix it. We'll mobilize the resources. And so Mugabe and Nkomo came back to the conference table. So they were of the same mind.
So thank you so much. We have about 10 more minutes for questions, and then the food is waiting for us. Johannes, who would you like to pick next?
Let me comment something first, and I'll ask.
Yeah, Mr. Ambassador has very clearly said all. The land question in Africa is still a question. I'm worried about South Africa. I'm worried about Namibia. All these targets are going. I heard Mr. Mugabe once in Addis Ababa saying that, am I elected leader of the people, or am I a real estate head of the white farmers? That was a question he addressed. So it was a very crucial issue. The land issue, I don't know, Mr. Ambassador can tell us the percentage, but 84% of the land was owned by 12,600 white guys. So it's disproportionate. So transferring and sharing is one of the issues. I have one question for you. You want a question? So what do you think of the post-Mugabe time? How is it going to be seen with all these political up and downs, with the inflations? Right now, it's only a dollar working in Zimbabwe. There is no any other currency. I saw a 4 million currencies. That was the past inflation. So how do you see it?
Yeah, at the moment, Zimbabwe adopted the US dollar as its currency because the Zimbabwean dollar could no longer, had lost its value because of the economic warfare waged on Zimbabwe. So I don't know for how long Zimbabwe will continue to use the US dollar, but in the meantime, inflation has gone down. The fantastic figures that you mentioned, and at the moment I think it's 3 to 4% inflation. So we hope that it will continue at that level. As for the economy, I think that there's. I just came back from Zimbabwe myself. I came back in April. There's an air of great expectations. They think that once the situation is normalized with the Western powers, we've been waging war on Zimbabwe, that there will be more direct investment, foreign direct investment, both from the West and from the East, and that this could lead to economic growth for the benefit of Zimbabweans and for the benefit of the region.
Okay, so we can take 2 more questions?
Yes.
Johannes, can you decide? Thank you. Here you go, Colin.
Hello. My question is Robert Mugabe going to contest in the upcoming elections? That's my question. I want to know whether he's going to contest in the upcoming elections.
Just a second. And another question? It could be simple. Yes, sir. Yeah. It could be summarized.
My name is Yaya Fanusi. When we were involved in the decolonization process in Africa, I'm 70 years old. For Zimbabwe, I raised a lot of money in California with Leonard. I forgot his last name. He has a long name there. During the time we were struggling in Africa, we were not struggling to keep the present state structures created by the Europeans to benefit them, and which is still continuing to benefit them. I am 70 years old. If I was stupid, I would have been the president of an African country. Until you all decide we are going to impose. 2017, there's going to be a referendum on the Treaty of Federation and Federal Constitution. The people will demand it. We are working on it, and it's going to happen because that was my baby from the time I was 7 years old in Africa.
All right, thank you. That's a comment.
Your Excellency, I'm Amjad Chaudhry. I'm the Muslim community. And these days, we see in US, religious freedom is very, international religious freedom is very prominent, and they talk about that. And in your country, what kind of religious freedom they have, and what kind of religion they have?
What?
What kind of religious freedom?
Oh, religious. Oh, yeah.
There is
Okay.
Scientology there.
Oh, okay. Yes. The 2 major parties in Zimbabwe, MDC, Tsvangirai, and ZANU-PF, have already held their congresses, their party congresses, and both of them have endorsed their leaders as the presidential candidates. So Robert Mugabe is going to stand for ZANU-PF, and Morgan Tsvangirai is going to stand for MDC Tsvangirai. Yeah. Yes. Yes. But you know, that question has been asked by many people, and if you ask, well, I'm not a politician, I'm a diplomat. if you ask the party, they will tell you, we don't want anybody else, we want Robert Mugabe.
No, hold on.
So,
you have to amend the constitution to change that. It is inter-party constitution.
Yeah, no, what? Yes, exactly. That is open. But it so happens that in his party, they don't want anybody else. They want him only. So, a party is a political party is a voluntary organization. Each party organizes itself and says, we're going to have a Congress, and this is the man we want to be our presidential candidate. So this is what, now you have to join ZANU-PF and suggest that.
Okay, let me I have two more questions, 1, 2. All right, first, sir, 1 and 2, 2 questions. 2 more questions.
Mr. Tanvi's question was answered.
Oh, all right, oh, okay. Oh,
yes,
answered.
Yes. Before the British came to our country, we had our own religion. We believed in the Almighty God, and you reach the Almighty God through the spirits of the ancestors. And we had the major spirit was at a place called Matonjeni. That's where the cult of Mwari was based. But when the British came, they brought their own religion and proceeded to convert indigenous population into Christianity. As we speak now, I think that over 90% of Zimbabweans would profess to be Christian, even they may not be baptized or whatever, but Zimbabwe is basically known as a Christian country. But I think that is a kind of syncretism, that while people profess to be Christian, they also practice their African religion, and they don't see any conflict in that. But we don't have a large Islamic population because Arabs didn't come to our country like they did in Tanzania, Kenya, and so forth. But we do have now some Africans who have embraced Islam, but they are a tiny minority.
I know the Ambian Muslim community had a mission there.
Yes. Oh, when I was growing up, in the whole of Harare, it was called Salisbury then, there was only one mosque. And there was another mosque in Bulawayo, the second largest city. In other words, in the whole country, there were only 2 mosques. Today, there are thousands of them, which bears testimony to the fact that Islam is a vibrant and aggressive religion, which has got a lot of missionary zeal, proselytizing, and Christianity is on the retreat. Unfortunately.
I'm just trying to get a better understanding for clarification as to the continuation of Mugabe's government. Since there have been so many opposition leaders who are really very qualified in projecting themselves as being leaders that were dedicated and committed to wanting to help the people improve their lot. And since Mugabe has been in position, of course, you alluded to the financial strain that has been in existence for so long. How come, if you have to talk about democracy, and the people really are advocating for Mugabe to continue in position, why was he also very much involved violently in defeating and discouraging the opposition that were in place?
Well, I think that every ruling party, everybody in power, you said, discourages the opposition. They do that. But in spite of the fact, in spite of the fact that he was discouraging the opposition won the last election, and they're the majority in parliament now.
All right. We're run out of time. We'll have now reception. We can talk with His Excellency when we are in the reception, okay? This is what I want to say. This is a culture that we have to develop eventually in the center. I'm very grateful to the Center of Scientology. You did a great job. They like it very much. And I like to thank Your Excellency for all your answers. If there is an unanswered question, it can be discussed, because politics is a debate always. It's an eye in the beholder, it's an ear in the hearer. So one thing, what we should know is stability, peace is very important. If you ask Jesus Christ to be a president of one of the African countries, Africans will be happy. But if he cannot feed them, they will crucify him. The same thing Muhammad, the same thing anyone. So stability and economical enhancement is very important. If we focus on that, political process will go up. Can you imagine a hungry American will stay weak against his government? No. So it's always depending on stability, economy, and good security. That stabilizes the country. So a one-man, long time period in the power, or why not he's like Mandela, he could say that and he will retire. That's a question. That's a very good question. That should be addressed. But sometimes, politics is a game of the groups. Margaret Thatcher runs for the 4th term, and her party kicked her out. And this can happen in the same way. American government amended the Constitution in 1950 after President Roosevelt runs for 4 terms. Before that, it was a moral rule. Sometimes there are moral rules, sometimes there are constitutional rules. So that's the way it works. Thank you very much for everyone. Let's give a big for Barry Berger.
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. Next door there are past hors d'oeuvres, and there's also incredible Zimbabwean food that the ambassador's incredible wife prepared for you all. So she can tell you a little bit more about her. She's over there, and you can ask her what it all is. And there you go. Please enjoy.
Thank you.
I'm not going to mince any words, and then we will discuss. It is pertinent to mention here that the Western powers who are preaching democracy and freedom today were not on the side of the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid struggles in Southern Africa. In fact, some of you may even know that Nelson Mandela and his colleagues in the ANC, it was only when Condoleezza Rice said, like an afterthought, she said, these guys are still on our list of terrorists. And they removed them from the terrorism list. Was it 7 years ago or something like this, just before Obama came in. So in the U.S., they defied UN sanctions. UN sanctions that had been imposed on the rebel Ian Smith regime in Zimbabwe, the famous or the notorious Byrd Amendment was a piece of legislation passed by the U.S. Congress, which was crafted to defy United Nations Security Council sanctions on Rhodesia in order to enable the importation of chrome and other what they called strategic minerals. Now, The Lancaster House Constitution, under which Zimbabwe was governed until about 10 days ago, when we got a new constitution on the 22nd of May. Yes, this year.